You're listening to ThunderQuack Podcast Network.
Hello there, and welcome back to Force Perspectives for the fourth episode of the Acolyte Day. I am your host, Michael Cohen, and joining me, as always, my favorite Tynan tracker, Joe Hogan.
Guys, I'm actually the Sith. You can put all of your questions.
It's
to
you.
rest. It's me.
It's you.
It's always been me.
Listen, everybody else was like, oh, the mystery of the Sith, the mystery. There is no mystery here. This episode was nothing but confirmations for me. It's like it could not be more obvious, and maybe I'll eat my words, and I'll be sheepish, doubtful by the end of the season. Even if I am wrong, I'll still be like, well, that's dumb. They should have done what I wanted. But and I'll go full fandom menace. But this episode, that one scene in particular, which we'll talk about, really put me on the oh, I'm right. I'm 1,000% right. If I'm not right, I will be very, very surprised. But Joe, what did you think? This episode has been, I don't know if I would consider it divisive, because the people who are mad about it are the people who've been mad about every episode.
Yeah.
But how are you feeling? How are you feeling 4 episodes in? Because this is the slump, right? This is every single one of these shows. Obi-Wan, Andor, every season of Mando, Book of Boba Fett. We hit the 4th episode, and that's when everybody goes, yeah, I don't know if the show is that great, right? Coming off of the 2-part premiere, everybody loses their mind. 3rd episode, can't wait for it, everybody's excited. And then by the time that we get to the 4th one, every single time we get this slump where everybody starts going this show's not that great, actually. So how are you feeling 4 episodes in?
Yeah, I'm super into it still. I mean, really, my biggest problems are good problems to have. It's like, I just want more. Want more of the show. To me, this week felt like the worst offender of the, and then the show's over. That's it. Okay, see you next week. It's like, oh, it's just like a little abrupt. But I also understand that they needed to cut it in a place that felt natural. And from my understanding, next week is not really going to have that. So it made more sense to cut where they cut, so that next week everything can just kind of get straight along into the business, giving us the business. It's awesome. It is awesome. I love the show.
Yeah, I mean, I am loving every single episode. People who have complaints, I think I don't know. To me, it's one of those things. So this episode has a real short runtime. It's only 30 minutes long. As opposed to, I believe the previous ones were both around 45, right? Or all 3 of the previous ones. Clock 36 minutes last week, so that's not that much long. Or sorry, that was Revenge and Justice. Let's see. Destiny. How long was Destiny? 41 minutes. Yeah. So they're just all over the place. These episode lengths are all over the place. This is one of those things with streaming that actually kind of bugs me a little bit. I appreciate that without the need to worry about commercial breaks and schedules, that run times can be whatever they want to be, right?
Right. Yeah.
I do also think that there's a comfort for the viewer that I think is important in a consistent runtime and a consistent pacing to an episode. We get into weird territory on stuff like Star Wars, where it's like, this is a show, but it's also just kind of a really long movie. But to me, I often feel like let's be a little bit more, strict with how long these things are going to run. just so that like everybody can have proper expectation, right?
Sure.
But yeah, the aspect of it just being kind of like all over the place. And the other part of it is that it actually like then it prohibits it from ever being able to be on TV, which I think is also a very weird business choice. I honestly think like one of the things that Disney should look at, all of these streaming services should look at, they're not making enough money off of these streaming platforms, right? And it's because like they went all in on streaming. They like put everything on black, right? And then it comes up red and everybody's like, wait a second, how are we losing so much money? And it's like, well, because you're investing all of your resources on one platform. Disney has started to put their stuff out in physical format, but not in a wide enough release that it's going to really make them any money, because nobody knows that you can get these shows on Blu-ray now, right? Like on 4K HD. I think if they did, I think if they pushed that a little bit more, that people would actually be very willing to buy this stuff. And then like honestly, first on Disney Plus, we'll all pay for it. Like all of us who are here right now paying for Disney Plus will continue paying for Disney Plus. What their broken thought process and methodology is that people who aren't paying for the platform to watch these shows on day one are going to show up eventually to watch the show. And that's not true. That's just not true. It's not reality. It's not the way that people do things, right? But if you put these on TV, those people who still have cable subscriptions, those people who still have live television, who still have ABC, they're not coming to Disney Plus to watch this show. They're never coming to Disney Plus to watch this show, right? So put it on TV. Put it on TV and get ad revenue off of it. Why wouldn't you, right? But when you do these weird run times, now this show can never run on TV because, like, how are you going to do that? Right? You'd have to re-edit stuff. Like you'd either have to cut them all down to 22 minutes, like, or you have to cut the whole thing into 22-minute chunks, right? Which maybe you can. I don't know. Like it would be interesting to take a look at it and do a TV edit of something like this or Obi-Wan and go like, okay, like if I'm going to do 22-minute episodes, right? You take how many episodes is Obi-Wan? 6 episodes? And
That's a great question. How many
somewhere
episodes?
around there, right?
Yeah,
I think it's
you're
6
right.
episodes. And I think that they're like 40-ish minutes a piece, but they also have weird run times, right? But like you just break it up and you're going to need to make edits. You're going to need to like either add in extended scenes that we didn't get, which is a great reason for people to tune on TV. Put it like build it into the business model, tell your creatives, leave some stuff for the TV edit so that people have a reason to subscribe to ABC, right? So they're either going to get it through a streaming thing or like go to the website or whatever, in which case you're going to get ad revenue off of that, or they're going to watch it on TV, in which case you're getting ad revenue, right? Like I don't know. To me, it's the way that they've pigeonholed themselves into this streaming only format and keeping things sort of like, I mean, gatekeeping it, right? Like intentionally, not in like a like a PC way, but in just like it's literally it's behind a paywall. It's gated. It's gated content, right? It to me, it just it's myopic. It's really myopic and short-sighted. And I feel like you could reach a much wider audience if you put these on Disney Plus and then aired them on ABC the next week, right? Like you're constantly perpetually a week behind on ABC, but if you don't have a Disney Plus subscription, then you can at least get it there. Because you know what that'll do? Somebody will tune into the first episode and then find out, oh, the next one's on is on Disney Plus, and then they'll go subscribe to Disney Plus. That's a much better business model than hoping that the internet talks loud enough about your show that people subscribe. Because the people who aren't on the internet are never going to hear it, right? It like to the point to further cement that point. But there's a bunch of people mad about Ki-Adi-Mundi in this episode because apparently he has a birth date in a Star Wars Insider from 1999, and this contradicts that.
Is that when it's from, this whole thing?
Yeah, get out of here. But
Oh,
they're just
Lord.
there. That we talked about this last night, right? Like in our chat, right? We were talking, and I was saying like it's like they're because you're like they're just looking for things at this point, and it's like absolutely 1,000%. That's all they've ever been doing. This is just engagement bait, right? They're just creating vitriol in order to get clicks on their tweets and their TikToks and their YouTubes.
Mm,
That's it. That's the whole point. That's the whole purpose of it. So, as I have been saying all season for this show, just ignore them. Don't give them
yeah.
oxygen. Stop. Like, this is the thing. Not only are people giving them oxygen, there's a lot of people throwing gasoline on the fire
Mm.
by letting everybody know that these idiots are saying these things, which we are also doing, right? But so it's a little bit hypocritical. But like, I'm just trying to illustrate a point, right? Like, it doesn't matter what it is. They could have been like, "Oh, we don't like Basil. Oh, this show has a bunch of not white people in it," right? Like, whatever. Pick one of their stupid topics. It doesn't matter. What they said is irrelevant. They say something new every week. Next week, we are going to make a concerted effort. We're not going to talk about it at all. But I just sort of like to illustrate my point about like if you're not on the internet, then you're never going to hear about this show from the people who are on the internet saying that it's great. Um, most people have no idea that any of that is going on. Any of the
Mm.
like the hate stuff is going on. Most people are completely unaware, right? To the extent that I'll be in conversations with regular humans and they'll start saying things that are very much like fandom menace talking points, but they're coming at it from like a very organic, natural place. And I have to like stop myself of like, they have no idea. Like if yes, I could tell them like, hey, you know that the things that you're saying are kind of like you've kind of gotten them third or fourth hand from like these alt-right douchebags on the internet that are trying to stir up hate and all that stuff online. And it's like there's no point. There is no point because I'm not going to spend 45 minutes explaining the internet to somebody who doesn't hang out on Twitter.
Mm.
um but that it like that's just kind of the whole thing, is that I really think that because the data can be tracked so easily, that the studios are listening to Twitter, they're listening to TikTok, they're listening to Instagram and YouTube and all of this. They're tracking the hashtags and it's going into dashboards that they're looking at in their executive meetings so that they have numbers that they can make decisions based off of. And so that they have numbers that they can look at and then they can make decisions in contradiction to the actual numbers. But
Mm.
um the like it's easy to quantify what whether or not people are talking about things and the sort of like things that I think that they've actually gotten very savvy at being able to like pick this stuff out and actually put like the emotionality to it, because what we've seen from Disney in the last couple of years is a lot of reaction to a lot of this online hate, because it is the majority of the conversation, whether it's the people saying the hateful things or the people defending against the hateful things. What's coming through in the algorithm and what's coming through on their dashboards are tweets about the fact that people hate Acolyte,
Mm.
right? They're not getting the people who I think are actually the overwhelming majority, but most people are quiet about it. Most people either like don't really say much, or what they say is more subdued, right, or like less frequent. But like every time that you retweet one of these idiots, or you duet them on TikTok in order to like refute their thing, all the dashboard is picking up is that post had engagements, right? That's all that matters to Disney as a company. So they're just
Mm.
seeing these hate tweets and then they're seeing how much engagement they're getting. They don't understand what a ratio is. We're talking about like 60-year-old white men who don't know how to open a PDF, right? Like, Brenda, my email is broken again. Have you logged in? What do you mean logged in? Did you put in your password? I don't know my password, right? These are the type of people that we're talking about. just do it for me, right? Like my phone's not working. Is it turned on? No, it's not. Well, that's probably your first problem, right? Like it's all the classic IT nonsense. So these guys don't understand social media. They don't understand. They don't even understand marketing. They don't understand community engagement. They don't understand any of this stuff. So I'm sure that even as the starwars.com account, like at Star Wars on Twitter, is doing awesome stuff for this show. Like we talked about it a couple weeks ago, right? Like it feels like before Last Jedi, right? This is the first time in a long time that it's felt that way. But it like even with all of that goodness and the Yord Horde stuff and all of that, which is awesome and I celebrate so much, when the people running that social media account sit down in a meeting with whoever's in charge, and the person who runs the account probably never gets to. They probably sit down with a marketing manager. So I don't know what their org structure is like, right? But like they sit down with somebody who's running the marketing division of Lucasfilm, who is then reporting to like a chief marketing officer, because that's not even the person. And then the chief marketing officer is the person who talks to Kathleen Kennedy, right?
Mm.
And Bob Iger. So we're talking about somebody who's like several people removed, but like even if they've got to be in the same room as Kathleen Kennedy, like they're talking about stuff and saying things, and those execs are like, whatever you say, but then they're just ignoring it, right? Because they don't understand it. Because and why would they, right? Like it's not their job to understand that part of it. It is their job to listen to the people that do, but that is very seldom the way that it ends up working. So even though like we can look at it and go like there's all this great stuff happening in the community, what they're gonna look at is stuff coming through on a dashboard with numbers on it, and then they're gonna make decisions based off of that stuff. And it like it all you have to do is look at the way that TV ratings were treated before the internet, right? Like I mean they still technically are, but nobody listens to the Nielsen ratings anymore. Like it's not relevant. But like if for those who don't know, the way that Nielsen ratings work is that there are a certain number of families that basically have like a little notebook and they write down the shows that they watched, and that's pretty much it, right? So it is not an accurate representation of the number of people actually watching. It's an extrapolation based on a metric, right? So they'll say that it's got this share, and that means that this many of the people that they're listening to watched it. But that data is going to be skewed demographically because it's not real data. It's they've like handpicked these Nielsen families, right? So it's not an accurate representation of people who are actually watching. It's not representative of the number of people that are actually watching, right? And the way that data gets used from online metrics is really no different. As much as you hear a lot of conversation about how, you know, like, oh, there's all this data, there's like, you know, and they're able to do all this stuff, algorithms, blah blah blah. At the end of the day, two things happen. The data is mostly garbage, right? Most companies, in my experience, are not keeping the quality control on their data streams, like whatever their analytics are. They're not keeping it clean. It is not scientific. It is not useful data. It's complete nonsense. And then the other part of it is that it doesn't matter what the data says. The execs are going to do what they're going to do. When the data supports them, they will use it. When it doesn't support them, they will have an excuse for why this is an outlier, right? Every single time, corpo's gonna corpo, man. Like it's just what they do. So yeah, it's a very weird thing to me. I feel like having a marketing background and having a UX background, which is why, you know, like I know this stuff about data, because that's one of the things that you do when you are in UX is you are you know, called to you know, go over the data and make decisions based on that. So you'll do that. You'll go over the data and you'll be like, well, according to the data, this is our demographic. This is what people are doing. This is how people are interacting with the product. You'll present that to your manager or to, if, in my case, directly to executive, and they will just tell you that you're wrong every single time. Like, well, that's not our audience. It's like, well, Google Analytics says that it is, and that's how we're tracking this metric. Well, that's not who I talk to. So cool. Well, you're one person, but that's the way that it's often
That's the attitude, yeah.
treated. Yeah, like they will believe their anecdotal evidence over hard data every single time. But then also like you don't just set up these tracking metrics and stuff like that, these KPIs and stuff, one time and then walk away and hope that they keep working. Things break, like algorithms change, methodologies change, and as they do, you need to be updating this stuff and paying attention to it. And Disney, Paramount, Universal, WB, like all of these companies, they are operating from the executive perspective at least 10 years behind at all times, right? It's just the nature of it, right? That like their decision making is always behind the curve, which is how you can get, smaller companies to come in and disrupt and stuff. Dropout TV is a really great example where like College Humor gets bought up by another company. That company doesn't understand metrics. They don't understand the actual value of the product that they've bought, and they slowly, just tear it apart. So everybody gets laid off eventually, and then the people who were the geniuses behind everything that we loved about College Humor go and make Dropout TV. And Dropout TV, because it is small, because it's run by people who were actually involved in the creation of the content as well as the distribution, they understand what they're doing, right? And they've kept it small and they've kept it tight, and as a result, like, they make awesome stuff for a very specific audience, and they're very successful with it. And I you just look at examples like that, but yeah, 30-minute runtime. That's all of that. So this is my little tirade on streaming platforms. I just think that like it really would like behoove these companies to take a step back and assess whether or not what they've been doing for the last 5 years is actually working, as opposed to trying to just sort of like press on, which is a little bit of what has been happening of like, well, we're just gonna, every 6 months Bob Iger says, oh, we're pumping the brakes on content, right? We're focusing on quality over quantity, and then 6 months later they'll have an earnings call or a press conference, and it's like, here are all of the things that we're announcing, and they'll announce 3,000 things, right? And it's like they just keep flip flopping back and forth with this nonsense, when what they really need to do is reassess how people are interacting with the content, and whether or not, the streaming platforms are actually like the best destination for every single piece of content. Because I think some stuff is actually better suited to a regular TV model. And if we just stuck with that, like if you just have it on both platforms, because like, what a great draw for Disney Plus to say, like, you can watch this without commercials on Disney Plus, right? Like that you'd get way more people subscribing with that ideology than you do with the running commercials during other shows for shows that are on Disney Plus. Do you watch a lot of live TV?
I don't even have cable.
Yeah, neither do we. We cut cable in like 2020. Yeah, in 2020, because I needed it for Arrow. When we were doing Quiver, and then the second that Arrow was done, not the second, but like I think within a month or two of Arrow being done, we cut cable, which was like right at the beginning of the pandemic. Yeah, we haven't looked back, but whenever I'm at my mom's place, I end up, she just always has a TV on, if not two. There's just always a TV running, and so I see a lot of commercials when I'm there, and I've been there quite a bit lately. So I've noticed, like I've been privy to the marketing efforts to the normies, and it's like, yeah, like their 30-second TV spots for things like the Acolyte, that is like a lightsaber, you know, the shot of like the
Yeah,
lightsaber like whipping through the trees, right? It's
yeah.
basically like a planet, a Wookiee, the lightsaber, and then Disney Plus logo. So subscribe on Disney Plus, only on Disney Plus, and that's their whole marketing campaign for regular folks. And to me, I'm just like, you're not getting anybody with this, guys. Like nothing that you just showed is proving anything other than there's another Star Wars show.
Mm.
Like that's all you're communicating is there's another Star Wars show, because you're just like, what are the things on the lunchbox? A Wookiee, a spaceship, a planet, and a lightsaber. Okay, cool. I yeah, and
Boy,
that's it, right?
imagine if you were like, "Wow, Wookiees! I want to watch the show,"
Mm-hmm.
and then this episode happens. Like, oh, all right, that was
I
fast.
yeah. Yes. Let's do that. Let's get into the actual episode itself. So, I this one's here's the thing. I said this at the beginning, right? Fourth episode slump is not a slump. This is a pacing thing. It's like this is the way that these stories get told, especially when they're on the like this 8 episode run, which is what we've got here, right? Is 8. Um,
Yes.
yeah. So like we are at the beginning of the second act, and it's a little bit of um a weird transition, because last week was purely flashback, but we're picking back up with the story. You know, we're back in the Jedi Temple, sort of like gathering, you know, the allies and whatever that we're going to need for this next leg of the journey, and figuring out, you know, what are next steps after everything that happened in the second episode, right, and the fallout of that. And yeah, it's gonna be like we have to build steam back up. Like that's the way that this goes,
Mm.
right? So to me, like I don't know. I think pacing wise, it's actually like it's very refreshing, because now we know that next week's gonna be like all killer no filler, right? Like
Mm.
we're gonna theoretically we're gonna pick up where we left off. I mean, we won't. There'll be a cold open, and the cold open will be something else, but then we'll jump back into this fight and everything that we sort of saw um, uh, in the trailers and stuff of this fight. This episode is called Day. The next episode will undoubtedly be called Night. And yeah, to me, it's like it's a perfect one too. It's one of those things where it's like, oh, I'll bet you they wanted to put these like as a two-parter, like
Yeah.
release both episodes. But I don't know, like we'll see what the runtime is on the next episode, right? Is it also 30 minutes, or is it a longer one? Maybe it might be, right? But rest assured, it's going to be an awesome fight, right? Like based on the fights that we've gotten so far, I think we can definitely count on it being great. But I'm jumping all over the place. The whole thing is that they got to go to the planet that Kelnaka is on, and they want to get there before May, and
Am I remembering it? They want to bring him back though, right? Like they don't
yeah,
want to wait there for May. They're just expecting to run into her, but like they're actually trying to bring Kelnaka back to Coruscant, right? Am I
yeah.
remembering that correctly? Okay.
There are multiple things happening, right? Because like Cord and the other Jedi are sorry, Cord, Yord, and the other Jedi are definitely like they're on a mission, and that mission is to like recover Kelnaka and bring him back. Um, Soul, Jackie, and Osha are a little bit more on like this May thing, right? And like Jackie, by virtue of the fact that she's just kind of following Soul's lead, and she's connected herself to Osha,
Mm.
right? But Soul and Osha are very much like in the, you know, like this isn't about Kalnaka. This is about May.
Mm.
And you know, Soul being like, there's there's still good in her. Like she's not totally gone. We can rescue her, right?
Mm.
So yeah, like I think that's one of the reasons why we've kind of got the Yord and Osha conflict in this episode. They're kind of at odds, because Osha knows what she's there to do, but she doesn't want to do it. Like that's a big part of it, right? But Yord is like giving her a pep talk. Meanwhile, like this isn't even like what you're talking about is not our mission. But if she shows up, you need to be prepared, and that's it,
Mm.
right? Like just like you can do it, right? Like I don't. I really like their dynamic. Actually, I really like the relationship between Yord and Osha.
I like
It's
everybody's dynamic.
well,
Like
yeah,
Osha and Jackie have a really sweet one.
yeah,
Even though it's not sincere, I think Chimera and May's dynamic is kind of neat too.
yes. It's very fun. It's a lot of
Yeah.
fun. Yeah. As well, like I mean, like it'll be one of those things on rewatch. Chimera is going to be an interesting character to go back and reevaluate everything that he was doing, no matter
Mm.
what way it turns. I mean, like I'm
Yeah.
fairly positive he's behind that mask, but no matter what way it turns, even if he isn't, then it's like okay, so then what was going on really with that character, right? Once we have the full picture, but yeah, like I don't know, I really I like the way that they keep kind of pairing off and pairing up and splitting off characters for these little moments and stuff. But before we get into the stuff on the planet with Basil and the tracking and all of that, let's jump back to to this small council meeting that we had. Very interesting
Mm.
because obviously we've been talking for the last 2 weeks about Vernestra Rowe a lot, and under the assumption that she is on the Jedi Council. What we didn't account for is the sort of like the hierarchy of multiple councils, essentially.
Mm.
Because the impression that I got from this episode, it was not explicitly said, but the impression that I got is that the Jedi around that table were a council, but they are not the High Council,
Mm.
because Vernestra specifically calls out the High Council, right? Or does she say? Somebody says it. Somebody says High Council.
I think it was her. Yeah,
But
pretty
I
sure.
think it was her. And so this is a glimpse into the organizational structure, or org structure, which is a term that I used a minute ago, of the Jedi that I don't think that we've ever really gotten to see before, which is like how are decisions being made at lower levels, because the characters that we are dealing with most often are directly connected to the High Council, to
Mm-hmm.
Yoda and Mace and all of them. We're talking about Obi-Wan and Anakin, we're talking about Qui-Gon, we're talking about or we're specifically talking about council members, right? But there are thousands of Jedi at this point in the story. They can't all be reporting directly to the High Council. The High Council is making bigger decisions, right? Galaxy wide sort of policy decisions and that sort of thing. So it makes sense to me that there would be like these smaller, whether they're considered councils or they're just sort of like a working group or whatever, however they want to categorize it or sort of qualify it. What we see is we see Vernestra, we see Ki-Adi-Mundi, and a handful of other Jedi, obviously all masters. And it appears that Soul is under that, like he's another step down from that,
Mm.
but that they're sort of deliberating based on the information, based on the report that Soul has given. And it's very much mirroring Qui-Gon's report of Darth Maul in the Phantom Menace, right? Like
Right. Yeah.
it's and people are like, it's like the same. It's like, yeah, that's kind of the point, actually. Like that, the whole deal. And including Ki-Adi-Mundi, I think was a really smart choice in this, because
Mm.
it gives us a piece of consistency here where we go like, oh, he's always been this way,
He's been warned
right?
before. Yeah.
oh, like a master that doesn't even know their apprentice. That's absurd. And it's like, well, it's true. I don't. Who cares if it's absurd? Like what? Like your judgment take on this is not important. What like the facts are important. But that's Ki-Adi-Mundi for you, right? Well, the Sith haven't been seen in over a millennia. Like, well, I'm telling you that I saw a Sith. Like it happened. He attacked me. I almost died. Yeah, like that whole aspect of it, I think is I think fun. Like I think that's great. But
I think it works great. Yeah, people are
yeah,
so hung up on it though. Weird.
it's really weird to me. Like you know what it is? There's I think that there's two ways to approach stories like Star Wars, like franchise stuff. One is the way that I think a lot of people do, which is I am invested in this. I am paying attention to all of this stuff. And so when new information comes to light that I wasn't expecting and I have to integrate into my perspective, it's frustrating. I
Yeah.
find that difficult, right? And then the other is an attitude of malleability, or I would say actually more of like a laissez-faire attitude towards canon, which is what I think like that's how I try and approach it, and I think you've gotten closer to that the more you and I discuss Star Wars.
Mm.
I because yeah, like it doesn't matter. A like nothing that was presented in this episode contradicts anything important, right? Um, it might contradict something that you like, right? But like here's the thing for me. My favorite Star Wars stories outside of the stuff on screen are the Brian Daley Han Solo Adventures novels. They've been non-canon for as long as the canon has existed. They basically came out and then were immediately discredited. Like Empire Strikes Back starts undoing stuff that is in those books, and that's within a year. Like that's within a year of those books having come out.
Yeah.
So like by the time that you're done Return of the Jedi, it's like those were just like they have as much like sort of veracity as the early Marvel comics, right? Which I also love. That's another one of the things that I love so much about Star Wars, like old school, like retro Star Wars, is those Marvel comics, the 70s and 80s ones, right? I so like that's my attitude going into any Star Wars is like, well, is it a good story? Does it have the heart of Star Wars? That's what I care about more than anything. Is it thematically on point? Is it, you know, is it connective with the greater Star Wars? Does it inform? Does it enhance? Right? And with that approach, with that attitude, I think that is a specific attitude of openness that makes me enjoy new information, like seeing Ki-Adi-Mundi in this, right? Like it's like, oh, okay, cool. Like that, this now makes the Jedi Council scenes in the Phantom Menace even better. This now makes him getting gunned down on Megiddo. He's on Megiddo,
Yes.
I think so. Yeah.
Yes.
It makes that scene even better. It makes it even better. I just wish that those clones didn't crowd around him so that we could see what was happening. But Ki-Adi-Mundi is the worst. I know that I brought that up on a Rebel Cells, and you were
Yeah,
like, "What are you
you
talking about?"
guys hated Ki-Adi-Mundi.
Yeah,
You guys are really going in on him. I was like, I don't get it.
yeah, but the internet agrees. That's the thing, is that the
It's so
internet
weird. I
agrees.
don't get it. I
And
don't get that
this appearance from him is further adding to that part of his lore, right? Which I love. So if it contradicts a previous story in a novel or a comic book or something like that, like who cares? Who cares? It doesn't really matter. Like at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. That those stories still exist, and what, to be clear, what we're talking about isn't even a story. It's I think like almost like a databank entry, right?
Yeah.
Like it was like just kind of given as like a thing, you know, that this is how old this character is or something. It's quite irrelevant
In
to anything important.
inconsequential in every way.
Exactly, yeah. But every once in a while something happens and it is consequential. It does alter our perspective on Star Wars, like what we got in last week's episode. Very, very, I mean, like, it added to the perspective for me. I think we talked about that a lot. It didn't really shift it or change it or anything like that. All it did was really like confirm the viability of what we know to be Anakin's origin, right?
Mhm.
Like oh, okay, so this is a thing that is what happened essentially, right? Like now, was it the Force or was it somebody else? We don't know. And apparently this is like in the contract when George Lucas sold Star Wars to Disney, that like um they can't make alterations to the existing movies,
Mhm.
which is one of the reasons why. So like the Disney Plus versions are like the final versions that we'll get of those films, um, which is kind of a bummer because I don't really like the McClunky edits, but whatever. Um, and we will likely never see the other ones on any of these platforms.
Mm.
Which really sucks because I'd really like it if they would release the theatrical versions. Now, not theatrical. The closest thing that we have to theatrical are the THX, which are remastered, but a theatrical, I don't know that a theatrical cut of A New Hope actually exists, because by the time that Empire came out, he recut the movie twice.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty sure I'm right on that. But like, and then like every subsequent release, every time they re-released A New Hope, he made changes to it. So like the theatrical version of Star Wars A New Hope, which was just simply Star Wars, it doesn't really exist anymore. And it's also not what people are thinking of when they think of the theatrical versions. But I would say like the THX remastered versions. I
Yeah.
would really love it
Yeah.
if we had access to those alongside the 4K special edition versions, right? Just honestly, just for like historical purposes, right? Like I'd really like 4K versions of those THX remasters, but I don't know if that even technically exists or possibly exists. But
Mm.
in any case, I oh man, how did I even get on that? Oh, the other thing was that Anakin's origin will never be revealed. It'll
Okay.
never officially be revealed. That's it's this is a, I mean, I'm going off of, I obviously haven't seen the contract, but this is what I've been hearing over the last week since that episode aired. And people are talking about this, is that like because a lot of people were going in and bringing up that comic where Vader goes into, I don't know, he goes into the dark side or something like that, and
Mm.
he sees a bunch of visions or whatever. And one of the things that's in this comic is a vision of Shmi pregnant with Palpatine, like sort of the apparition of Palpatine, sort of like touching her, or like behind her, sort of like touching her stomach.
Mm.
And a lot of people have taken that as an implication that Palpatine created Anakin.
Mm.
But it's if you read that comic, it's sort of actually pretty explicit that the things that he's seeing are not real. They're his fears. It's the dark side sort of manifesting his fear back at him. And
Mm.
so he's sort of like he's having like an existential crisis in this comic, right? And so what I interpret that as, and I think what the intention of that is that his fear is that Palpatine, because he's worried about Palpatine controlling him. Like that's kind of one of the overarching things in that story. So it's like his fear is that Palpatine has been controlling him since day one, right? And so that's why he's seeing that, because he
Mm.
knows his origin to the extent that we do, which is what Shmi told us, which is that there was no father. She was just pregnant one day. And then, midichlorians, right? Like
Mm.
midichlorians exist. So, and then Palpatine says the line that he says in Revenge of the Sith, which would, I think, then lead Anakin to start to put that together, right, in his own head.
Mm.
And so that's what he's seeing. So is it necessarily what happened? No. Is it not what happened? Also no. Right? Like it's murky, and it's going to remain murky, and I think that's fine. But what we got last week was something that sort of reinforces the idea that what we think Palpatine or Plagueis or Tenebris or like one of these other Sith Lords may have done is possible, right? It's like it's a confirmation in world that like, yes, that can be done. Who did it? Who knows? Maybe it was just the Force. And I'm sort of personally subscribing to that ideology that it was not um, one of those Sith Lords, that it was the Force creating this Virgins, right? And that it was like natural, but then Palpatine took advantage of it.
So I mean, this is all headcanon because none of it is explicit, but
Yeah.
you don't feel that Plague, because he was talking about Plagueis when he brings it up to Anakin in episode 3. I don't know. I've always felt like that was very deliberate. It just kind of felt like something George was putting in there specifically to like lead us in the direction of what the truth is. Because the Sith do tell the truth. The Sith trickle truth a lot of things.
Yeah.
And like that just felt like something that was just enough of the truth to kind of help lure Anakin. Like, yeah, the Sith can do these really crazy things. Like, it can create life, for example. And in Anakin's head, it's like, oh, that makes sense because I mean, not that I think that this is what Anakin was thinking in that moment, but like you said, it's something that he could come back to later and say, oh yeah, okay, I was a virgin in the Force. Like, okay, that's interesting. And then hit him with the next thing. Even save people from dying. Oh, that's where I'm coming. Like, that's the thing. That's my selling point to the dark side. I've just always felt like Plagueis was directly involved with Anakin because you have the one side of the bookend of the trilogy where we learn that it's possible for that to happen, and Shmi, there's no reason that we wouldn't trust Shmi, and okay, so that's what happened. There's no reason for us to not believe her. And then the other end of the trilogy, we're getting that other little nugget of information. It just feels like very deliberate. So like to me, it feels connected.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a valid interpretation. I don't trust anything that Palpatine ever says.
But he tells the truth often.
Yeah, absolutely. He tells the truth, but I don't trust his truth either. Even when he gives facts, those facts, like I don't. So believing something and trusting something are different things in this, right? Like I'm going to split hairs, but in that instance, I'm gonna say that like I believe what Palpatine is saying. I don't trust why he's bringing it up.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Could Plagueis do that? Possibly. Is Palpatine aware that dark side practitioners have in the past? Absolutely. Right? Was Plagueis trying to figure it out? I think so. I would agree with that. Was he ever successful? Question mark. Right? I think even the Darth Plagueis novel kind of left that a little bit open, right? Like it's pretty cut and dry, but at the same time, it's also like we're still debating it, and that Plagueis novel's been out for a very long time. So it leaves enough, and it's been a long time since I listened to it, but I did. Like I have listened to that book. So I remember it being a thing of like it's entirely possible that the stuff that Tenebris and Plagueis were doing when Plagueis recruited Palpatine resulted in Anakin Skywalker. So 1,000% possible. Did it actually happen? Still a question mark, right? Sure. Was that their goal? Possibly also, right? That like that was there. But Palpatine's reaction to Anakin Skywalker in The Phantom Menace, in particular, at the end of the film when he says we'll watch your career with great interest, right? Like that moment, that delivery makes me feel that Palpatine is adjusting his plan,
Mm.
right? Um, and I reinforce that with what we learned from Darth Maul in season 5 of the Clone Wars, and maybe even before that, maybe even in season 4, when he talks about Palpatine's plan, but especially in season 5, right? And at the very end of the series,
Mm.
when
With
he's talking
Ahsoka,
to
yeah.
Ahsoka, and he's like, "So it's happening then?"
Mm.
And it's like, Maul was originally supposed to be a part of this,
Mm.
right? And Dooku was also always a part of that plan as well, but Dooku wasn't a Sith Lord until Darth Maul fell, right? Like
Mm.
until Palpatine lost Maul. So like Palpatine's plan originally at the beginning of the Phantom Menace involves, you know, the Trade Federation creating this conflict that would eventually lead to the Separatists. Um, and but that Darth Maul was going to be a significant part of that plan moving forward, and then that changes, and that all changes in the midst of him discovering Anakin Skywalker. So I
Mm.
think like then you would imagine that then it takes him a little while of his subterfuge and nonsense to discover the origin of Anakin Skywalker, right? Like because I don't think that the Jedi would really be broadcasting that information. If anything, he probably learned it directly from Anakin because, like it's one of the pieces in the Clone Wars that I feel like we never really got very much of that I would have liked to.
Mm.
Because there's the whole aspect in Revenge of the Sith where Obi-Wan says like your relationship, like you're way too close with Palpatine.
Mm.
We see a little bit of it through the Clone Wars, but we really don't see a ton of the two of them doing their thing because Anakin is off fighting the war most of the time, right? So that's a piece where like that's like a Tales of the Jedi, Tales of the Sith, Tales of the Empire thing, where I think we could delve into that, right? That would be a really great episode if you were doing like a 3 for Palpatine. It would be to do like a Clone Wars era episode that is just like a really good example of him ingratiating himself with Anakin, along the lines of the stuff that we saw in Revenge of the Sith. That'd be really cool to see. But yeah, like at some point he finds out that Anakin was a virgin in the Force and has no father and all of that
Mm.
stuff. Eventually, he discovers this, and uh, I mean, possibly, we don't really know. Maybe Palpatine learns things through the Force, right? Like maybe he's spying on people that way. It's
Well, he
possible.
does in
Visions
Clone
and
Wars.
stuff.
We see him using that like weird black magic fire pit thing,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
he's able
yeah,
to see stuff and sense things. And yeah.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, it's entirely possible, but yeah, like I don't think if 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 Palpatine were responsible, then he wouldn't be surprised by Anakin's presence. He would be expecting Anakin's presence. That's not the vibe
Mm.
that we get in Phantom Menace. If Plagueis were responsible, I think that would also still be true. I think that there might be a little bit of an aspect of surprise from Palpatine, but
Mm.
that it would be like, oh, you've arrived, right? Like, oh, you're
Yeah.
finally here. Oh, now my plan can go into effect.
Right, but
But
he can't have that reaction in public when he realizes
obviously
it. So
obviously but we've never gotten it in any of the content, right? So
right,
like
yeah.
that's what I'm saying, like
Mm.
if we were given that information, like if something comes out tomorrow and it's a scene where Palpatine is talking to, I don't know, Masameda, and he's like, it's right after that, and he's like, hey man, the chosen one just showed up, like start the clock. In 10 years the Clone Wars begin, right? Like if this is sort of circling back to the whole thing with the council and with Mundi and all of that. It's like if that new information comes out, well then, you just integrate it into your perspective. You just integrate it
Yeah.
into the story. Um and many of the truths we cling to depend greatly on our own point of view. These stories are subjective. They
Mm.
are often from a subjective lens, with the newer stuff, especially the novels, especially the comic books. They are much less objective than the films. the place where people get hung up is that the original 3 Star Wars movies were shot with an objective lens. I mean that as a metaphor, but like in very literal terms, George Lucas used documentary filmmaking styles in making the original film, right?
Mm.
Part of it was the technical sort of accommodations that he was making for, you know, uh, I can't think of the word, but like the motion controlled, like the for the cameras have to be locked down so that we can do these things with the visual effects and blah, blah,
Sure,
blah,
yeah.
right? So that was a big part of it. But
Okay.
then he used it to his advantage, and I think that it was something that developed over the course of shooting the film, which was that like, well, if that's what I have to do for the visual effects, then let's use it in order to ground the story, right? So by giving the camera an objective lens, an objective viewpoint, it makes Star Wars feel real, as opposed to if you were running around with you know, handheld cameras, or you know, like doing these more sort of emotionally motivated camera moves, then it would heighten the fantasy aspect of it, right? It would be more fantastical. Like that would be the perspective, is that this is a story, as opposed to this is a thing that actually happened, which was what he was going for. So because of that, because that was just part of like selling the world of Star Wars to the audience, right? Because of that, people have a perspective that the story itself is always objective.
Mm.
And like that's, I think that is the case for most of the films. But then like this is one of the reasons why I think that people get a little bit ruffled by The Last Jedi, because The Last Jedi is the first film to really use a subjective point of view in some of the sequences. I mean, technically Empire is, because when Luke goes into the cave on Dagobah, that's not real, right?
Mm.
Like even like down to like physically, is it real? No, it's not. Like that's my interpretation of it, but like no, it's not. It's not real. When Rey goes into the cave on Octo, that's also not real. When she touches Luke's lightsaber, that's not real. When Luke goes into the cave on Dagobah, the same thing happens to him that happens to Rey when she touches that lightsaber, right? It's just it's the first time that we ever saw it, so it's like it
Mm.
feels a little bit different. Um, and then even before that, not before Empire, but before Last Jedi, in Revenge of the Sith, we see Anakin's dream, right? We see his perspective in that. So it's like, but that was a thing in Revenge of the Sith that a lot of people were like, oh, this is weird. I don't like that part. And it's like, it's not that it's bad. It's that it's unexpected, because that's not usually how Star Wars treats its stories.
Mm.
And like last week's whole episode of Acolyte was a subjective lens. That whole episode was subjective.
Mm.
There was nothing objective about that story. If we find out that 90% of that was false, I will not be surprised by that, right? Like I'll be like, okay, yeah, that makes sense, because we're seeing a you know, a 10-year-old's perspective, or however old she is, 8 or 10, whatever it is.
Mm.
Like we're seeing a child's perspective, a child's recollection of what happened, her specific perspective on those events. And then, you know, eventually we're going to find out what actually happened, or the rest of what happened. But that's still up in the air, right? So I think there's a lot of that happening in these stories that, especially because Acolyte's switching back and forth, right? The Last Jedi switches back and forth. It asks a lot of the audience. Not everybody is there, and that's not that's not a judgment on my part. Like just I critical thinking is not at an all-time high currently, because you know, the education system has been dismantled by conservative politics. So you got a lot of people who don't have media literacy. They don't have the ability to watch something and understand the things that we're talking about on first watch. And like I said, like that's not a judgment. Like I like it's then people are not incapable of it. They just don't have the tools.
Mm.
Um, and so when a filmmaker like Leslie Headland or a filmmaker like Ryan Johnson comes along and makes a story that is challenging in that way, I think it can make people really frustrated.
Mm.
And then they cling on to things that are easier to quantify, like Ki-Adi-Mundi's birthday, and they pull those out as like a thing to complain about, but that's not actually, in my experience, most of the time, I always like throw made up percentages on these things. So 90% of the time, but most of the time, what people are complaining about in fiction is not what they're actually upset about.
Mm.
That is my experience. I actually think most of the time in life, what people are complaining about is not actually what's making them uncomfortable. And anybody who's done any kind of talk therapy or any sort of like self-reflection or, you know, like inner work will understand where I'm coming from on this. Most of the time, our outside reactions, our external reactions are informed by something deeply subconscious and deeply internalized.
Mm.
Usually trauma. But sometimes the flip of that, right? Where we have something that's very precious to us, and when something contradicts it, that can be triggering as well, right?
Mm.
And so I think people who aren't connecting with the Acolyte, that are then looking for these things to nitpick, like that's where it's coming from. That's where so much of
Mm.
it's coming from. But man, we've talked so much in this episode. We've talked very little about the actual episode, and we
Yeah,
haven't
I
gotten
mean,
to
business as usual.
business. Yeah, but we haven't gotten to the main thing that I want to talk about in this one. We're so close, and I keep veering us away from it. So I'm going to circle us back. Vernestra Rowe specifically says, "Do not breathe a word of this to Yoda or anyone else on the High Council." That is absolutely Sith Lord behavior.
A little sus. A
That
little
is
sus.
absolutely 1000% Sith Lord behavior. If she is not the master, I am going to be very, very surprised. Let me once again be completely explicit, because even talking with Crystal on Tuesday night after watching the episode, I had to like sort of restate this to her, so that like, because she was like, what do you mean? Like she's like she's the one in the house. No. Okay, so let me be super explicit. Always two there are, right? No more, no
Mm-hmm.
less. A master
Mm-hmm.
and an apprentice. That's what
Sure.
Yoda says.
Mm-hmm.
That's the information that we have right now. The rule of two, as you know, sort of implemented by Darth Bane, is that, you know, post Sith War, the Sith will never have more than two, because if they get bigger than that, until they're ready to strike, until the Jedi have been defeated, even afterwards, right? Because Palpatine maintains that after.
Mm-hmm.
In order for the Sith to survive, you have to maintain the rule of two. That's why Darth Bane implemented it. So what we know right now is that there is a Sith Lord. As a matter of fact, we don't even know that. We are assuming that Darth Teeth is a Sith Lord, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a big assumption. It's a very qualified assumption based on his appearance and certainly what we saw in this episode. He's very, very powerful. We should say, are very, very powerful, because we don't know who
Well,
it is yet.
we also know that since Darth Bane, there is a lineage of two Sith out there. So two
Yes.
Sith exist.
Yeah.
So it is. I think it's a fair.
Yeah.
Fair,
So we have one right now. May is not a Sith, and I think that's where some people might be getting a little bit hung up. Is that like because of the language that we're using, right? Because we're referring to May as the apprentice of this person, her master. She's referring to him as master. Everybody else is referring to her as an apprentice. And I think that all of that language is in there intentionally to throw us off this trail. Like I think that that is a red herring. It's supposed to get us on this line of thinking that it's the two of them, but this is not the case. That character, Teeth, right? They have
Darth Teeth.
they have big Darth Maul energy,
Mm-hmm.
right? Big Kylo Ren energy, right? They do not come across to me as a Palpatine. There are some things sort of leading us in that direction of a Palpatine type character. Chimere feels much more like a Palpatine character. if he is in fact a Sith Lord. But I also think like these are things that are misdirects, right? Because eventually we learn that Darth Maul is also capable of the subterfuge and planning and all that stuff that Palpatine was capable of. We just didn't see it in the Phantom Menace. We only saw his martial prowess, right? But eventually we learn that he's just as duplicitous. He's just as sort of, you know, methodical, right? In his takedown of Mandalore and the crime syndicates and all of that stuff. So he can play the game too. And that to me is also true of this character. But he gives much more Darth Maul energy than he does even like Dooku energy, right? He's got that he's got that vibe to him. They have that vibe to them. I really need to, because we don't know. I want to be super clear, we don't know. But I'm going on the assumption that it's Chimera, right? That means that there is a Sith Lord out there somewhere that Chimera, that this helmeted figure is reporting to. Again, this is my interpretation of the Rule of Two. This is my interpretation of the story that we have so far. I do think it's Vernestra Rowe. That, like, I'm fairly positive that it's Vernestra Rowe. I think the fact that she is the only existing High Republic character to be in the show is suspicious by itself. I think her attitude is very different from the attitude that we have seen from her when she is younger in the High Republic stories that we have so far, which indicates to me like a you know, sort of massive shift in that character over the last 100 or so years, which is understandable. And yeah, this week, her being like, do not tell the High Council about this, we'll handle it, is absolutely an obfuscation to keep herself and the Sith hidden. It's a priority. If she is not the Sith master, she is at least being manipulated by in some way.
I got an extra piece of little support, I guess, for you. I think it was the second episode where they caught Osha, and they were like, "We can go get May right now." She's like, "No, come back here. We're gonna talk about it."
Yeah.
He's like, "But I can literally go get her. We can go get her right now." No. That's not how we do things. We're gonna talk about it. We're talking about it right now. Why can't you just plug me in on the hologram and we can talk about it? No. Come back. No. Okay.
Yeah. Vernestra has been getting in the way of Soul since the first episode, right?
Exactly.
Like that's what's happening here. And I believe that the Sith are, you know, I don't think that they're responsible for what happened on Brandok, but I think that when Vernestra became aware of what happened on Brandok, that well, actually, I take that back, because they have like they might be partially responsible, because how else did May get where she is? But also, like, there's another part of that that's like how long has May been under the guidance of this master? We don't really know, right? Because maybe it's like she's come of age, and so now she's, you know, moving towards this goal and enacting this stuff at this point. But it's been a long time, right? It's been 16 years. So
I feel like she's been under the master's influence since before the flashback episode, because like she's always like a little sociopath, right? But like, what kind of person? Oh, I'm not gonna let you leave.
Okay,
so
yeah.
I'm going to kill you instead. Like
this actually brings me back to a point that I wanted to make last week, which was that what was her name? Their other mother,
Coral.
Yeah, Coral. It's a very interesting choice to make her Zabrak and give her, I know that I said this, that, you know, like she's got that very like Night Sister
Mm-hmm.
accent,
Mm-hmm.
right? That Dathomirian accent.
Sure.
They also, because Eathcoth and Aegon Kolar, who are the other on-screen Zabrak other than Darth Maul that we get to see, right? They have facial markings. They're similar in fashion to Darth Maul's, but they're not the same.
Right.
But Coral's were very similar to Darth Maul's,
Mm-hmm.
very similar, and some of them looked like scarring and not
I had the same
facial
thought. It
markings.
looked like she had old ones and changed them.
Yeah. So like there is some sort
I
of
gotta look at her
alteration. There's
face
some sort
again.
of modification that is happening there. But I don't know. Like that's a big question mark for me. There's not enough there for me to assert anything yet, but there is just some stuff that I find suspicious.
Mm,
So she is also the one who uses the influence on Torben,
mm,
um, which feels very dark sidey to me, much more
right.
than what we saw Mother Anastasia doing, right? So yeah, it there's something to that, and the other part of it, and I don't know if I made this explicit last week, and if I didn't, I'm going to make it explicit now. I don't think that their goals with these two girls were altruistic. I
Right.
don't think that
Yeah.
it was about prolonging their coven or raising daughters. I think that's where a lot of the apprehension is coming from with
Mm,
Anastasia, is that like these two are lambs to the slaughter.
mm,
That was that ceremony was a sacrifice. They were up on the top of those steps and it was a very long drop down. And I think that had that ceremony concluded, I don't think that either one of those girls would have survived.
mm,
That is my um that's kind of what I'm operating under right now, and that like yeah, like that's why there was a lot of like weird mixed emotions going on, and why Coral was like, no, she can't leave, and Anastasia was like, she can do whatever she wants because she's my
mm,
daughter, right? Like, and I want her to go have like, and like the tears and all of that is like, in order for us to ascend to whatever next level, we need to do this thing. Well, I don't know, maybe not both of them needed to be sacrificed, but one of them needed to be sacrificed, right? Who knows, right? Like there's a bunch of different things that could be possible there, but I think that might be one of like the deep dark secrets of this story, is that like that wasn't gonna that coven is actually like, they are darksiders.
mm,
Like they're this is not like a oh, the Jedi are um I you know, they're just like discriminate against all other cultures of force users. I don't think that that's actually the case. I think that very specifically this coven has been told, you guys can't do stuff. You
mm,
guys, you've been like, because, and it would stand to reason for two things of like, when you all die, your coven dies because you're darksiders. We're not going to kill you because we're Jedi, but we also aren't going to allow you to continue to you know, propagate right throughout the
mm,
galaxy. The other thing is like, that would be like, the you aren't allowed to train children is very, could very much be in line with like, because like ritual sacrifice is part of your training,
mm,
like it's part of your culture, so like we are protecting these children, and it would also explain why they're so adamant about taking both girls,
mm,
right? Because that to me is one of the things where I look at it and I go like, there's an aspect here of like, I think that Leslie Headland might be playing with our perspective, that like that there's a subset of the fandom that's like, the Jedi kidnap children, like that's one of the
yeah.
things that they do, right? They ask first, but like they have essentially like, they take you away from your family, you're never allowed to see them again,
Mm,
right? um that's weird. That's weird for the good guys to be doing, right? And we're all talking about that and thinking about that, and it's in the text. It's in, you know, it's right there in George's stuff. But is she reinforcing that, or is she actually using that to subvert our expectations? And, you know, it's like, it's actually, you know, like we're going to paint the Jedi as bad guys in this perspective because that's how Osha and May are seeing them. But in reality, are they actually there to save these children? They know that. We don't know that, right? Like, I don't know. There's a lot. There's a lot there. So yeah, I don't know, man. We're still talking so much about last week's episode. I think that's by nature of the fact that this week's, well, as we talked about, was like it's setup, right? It's
Yeah.
a lot of setup,
Yeah,
and I think we've hit on the important stuff, which is that Kilnaka is dead. He was killed by a lightsaber. Now that wound looked fresh, so I am under the impression that May leaves Chimere hanging upside down. The second that she's out of sight, Chimere
Yeah.
like just uses the
Yeah.
Force and is out of
Sure.
that like instantly, because he's just pretending to be Jar Jar Binks right now. Like this character is Darth Jar Jar. Like that's to me like that's I think that's the idea here, is that this guy is Darth Jar Jar, right? It's like that
He's
concept
playing the
that
fool, but yeah.
yeah. I think that's like the genesis of where this character comes from. Because so much of this story so far has been Leslie Headland as a fan using things that we talk about online to tell this story, which I love it. I think it's so fantastic. But yeah, I also it's unclear, but I kind of got the vibe that the area that the Jedi walk through is that area where he was hanging upside down. That like they kind of come through like moments later and he's already gone. I think if that were the case, I think they could have made it more explicit, but I kind of read it that way because the framing of the shot was very similar. So it felt familiar. It felt like they were walking like right before they get to Kelnaka, they kind of go through that clearing, and it's like, is it another clearing or is that the same clearing from a slightly different angle? It's hard to tell because it's all just jungle, right? But I mean, like, I think that we can all agree, you know, it's a little bit interesting. You know, she kind of leaves him behind, and then she gets there 10 minutes, right? If he's flying around as we see him do, if it is Chimere, as we see the Sith Lord do at the end of the episode, I mean, like, easily Chimere could have gotten there before May, moments before May, killed Kelnaka, hidden, and is already there when Osha and the Jedi show up, right? Like that all, timeline wise, it all makes perfect sense. So yeah, I think that's what's going on. I think that's what's happening. It might be a little bit too straightforward for this show, which has been very like mystery, twisty, turny. But I also think that it makes perfect sense if Vernestra is actually the Sith Master, right?
Yeah.
Because next week, having it be revealed at the end of the episode that Chimere is that character, that he is the Sith Lord, that he's May's master, I think is a really great way to go into the last two episodes thinking we know what's happening, only for it to be revealed that we have had actually no idea what's going on. And that like to reveal Vernestra as a Sith in the last episode, you know, as she kills Soul. Get used to it now because that's what's happening. That's a perfect way to end a season. That's a perfect way to end a season. For us to be like, well, I guess we'll be tuning in for the next season. Yeah, Soul is absolutely going to die on this planet. He's absolutely going to die on this planet because what he says to Osha of like, look, as soon as we get May and we're off this planet, I'll tell you everything. He's never going to get that chance. It's not going to happen. Yeah, that is a Chekhov's gun if ever I've seen one. Like he is like that right there was them letting us know, you know, that is akin to Anakin saying to Qui-Gon, no one can kill a Jedi. I wish that weren't so, right? Yeah. It's gonna happen. Soul doesn't make it out of this season. Yeah, I think that's everything that I have for this episode. When they walked into that forest and they walk around, like they're going through the trees and there's the things on the trees, and it's like everybody else walks by it, and then Osha just starts to slow down, and I turned to Crystal and I was like, she's gonna touch it. She's so
I said
stupid.
the
She's so
same
dumb.
thing
She's
to
gonna
Tina.
touch it. And it's a great example of, was it predictable? Yes. Was it a great moment? Absolutely. It was so perfect because I'm going like, oh, the rest of the Jedi know better than to touch. I thought for a second maybe Jecki would, right? Because they kind of like they because that's where that shot starts, is on Jecki next to the thing and framed for her to like turn and touch it, and then she just like, I don't know, she makes some comment about it being creepy or something like that, and then walks. And then Osha walks around, and I'm like, oh, Osha's definitely gonna touch it. And then the second that she does, yeah, great Star Wars moment. Really, I thought that was really fun. It's just like, look at these gross things. They're absolutely, giant pill bugs, with wings. And I said to Crystal, I was like, oh man, that thing's got like slobbery mandibles, and we're going to see them in like 10 seconds. And then 10 seconds later, it's like flying in the air with slobbery mandibles. And I was like, I could make a Star Wars. It wouldn't be as good as this though. Yeah, I love this show, man. Do you have anything that you need to talk, anything pressing or?
I am a little bit bummed that we
Okay.
did not get Kilnaka in action at all. I understand why.
Mm-hmm.
It would have messed with the pacing. It wouldn't have made, like, I get it. But man, as soon as I heard Wookiee Jedi, I was like, yup, I want to see that guy beat somebody up. And just, I don't know, unless we're getting another flashback. I don't see it happening, but
we will.
I'm a little bummed, but we got 4 episodes left. I'm gonna keep it together for now. So
there are moments in the trailer with Kilnaka that we haven't seen yet. So yes, 1,000%. 1,000%. We're going to see another flashback, and we're going to see Kilnaka in that flashback. And I kind of alluded to it last week actually, but I don't want to, if people are like avoiding that stuff though, I don't want to spoil it. Or if they didn't clock it, I don't want to spoil it. But I'll go ahead and confirm this isn't the last that we've seen of Kilnaka. We're going to get to see more of that. Cool. Well, that's it. Man, we were all over the place in this episode, but that's okay. It was an interesting, I want to say it was a conversation, but it really wasn't. I just kind of mostly talked at you, but that's fine.
I asked questions and piped up a little bit.
It's true. Cool. Well, that's it for this episode. Obviously, we will be back next week to talk about the next episode of Acolyte. But I don't, man, like, come join us on Discord, guys. Come hang out on Discord and get into the conversation. This is the thing, is that like, you don't need to be on Twitter with all the gross people that are on Twitter when we have the Discord community. So if you're listening to this and you're like, I want to talk about Star Wars with people, but I don't want to like wade into the cesspool that is the internet, Discord, like our Discord is a perfect spot for that. Like, it's just there's great discussion going on, but it's all like super respectful. Everybody's I don't want to say that everybody's positive in the way that like everybody absolutely loves everything. People have questions and stuff like that, but like when I say positive, I just mean like everybody's like supportive of each other, and it's a very safe environment. Cool. Yeah, so everybody's just being like chill and cool about it, even if we like disagree on stuff. It's like, okay, yeah, that's a different take, right? So yeah, come hang out with us, thunderquack.com/discord, and join us there. It's much better than the comment section on YouTube, guys. Like don't go into the comments. Awesome. Thank you guys for listening, and we'll be back next week with another episode. Follow Force Perspectives on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at ForcePOV, and join us on Discord at thunderquack.com/discord. Support the show by visiting us at patreon.com/thunderquack to get early access to episodes, leave a rating and review on your favorite podcast service, or buy merch at store.thunderquack.com. Force Perspectives is a part of the ThunderQuack Podcast Network.